We'd like to call to order the Monday, June 28th regular school board meeting. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Grant?
Here.
Mr. Carpenter? He'll be here later, I understand. Mr. Guido?
Here.
Mr. Leeds?
Here.
And Mrs. Stone?
Here.
Will everyone please join me standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
Item 1.3, any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No.
Thank you. Item 1.4, approve the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Section 2, 2.1, legislative. Mr. Leeds.
A couple things. First of all, I'm going to defer some comments from to Holly for some comments that she got from Bassett today on the House Bill 1, I guess it is, or 10, whatever it is now. Anyway, that thing's not finalized yet, guys. There are a lot of things going on in the back rooms that people are in the Cuyahoga County and up around Toledo are upset that they are not getting their guaranteed funds. And they are wheeling and dealing. So it has to be, according to legislation, it has to be signed by July 1st as a budget completion by the governor, but that could be delayed. So I sent each of you an email, it was an email, but it's an attached video from Mr. Fleener from, he is on our side as far as the capped districts. He said there shouldn't be any districts capped and very few districts on a guarantee. So I sent that to you tonight, but please watch it because it's good. But you know, we'll know hopefully later on in the week unless they extend it, the deadline. That's where we are. Thank you.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. 2.2, Public Tech. Mr. Guido.
Just if you look right, coming up the hill, you could see the modulars are now gone, which is exciting, and they're starting one of the additions on one of the barns. I did want to thank Jesse for working with Dave Plotz, who's our facilities guy there, about part of the construction process is we have to tear one of the barns down. We had talked about possibly repurposing that here at our site. They were going to tear it down and move it over here and then put it up. We could have used it for whatever, but the cost was just way too expensive. It was, I think, was it 160 or 180? 130, 150 plus tax. But anyway, it was, yeah, so just too much work and too expensive for that. So we gave it a good effort, but didn't work out. So next, I really think that for an athletic facility that we've talked about, we should really do maybe some sort of a fundraiser for it. The need is definitely there. I think if we somehow organize something, maybe through the boosters or something to do that.
District-wide fundraiser.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's unfortunate that we couldn't do it because they're just going to tear it down, but it is what it is. It's pretty quiet over there other than the construction. So that's it.
Thank you. 2.3, Finance. Mrs. Stone.
I have no report this evening.
All right. 2.4, MEA. Anyone? All right. Moving on to 3.1, comments from the public. Seeing none, we will move on to Section 4, Treasurer's Business. Item 4.1.
Okay. I'm asking the board to approve the minutes from May 24th, 2021.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye.
Motion carried. Item 4.2.
So I'm asking the board to approve the treasurer's financial report for May 31st, 2021. Okay. So I'd like to report that our cash balance on May 31st in the general fund was $31,072,494. We have $39,058,502 in all funds. And we have 1 month left to go, June 30th. And as I've reported last time, the end keeps looking better in the beginning since we received significant subsidies from the state and federal government, which helped offset many expenses. In addition, we budgeted like it was, like some of it was a normal year, and then we budgeted like it was abnormal years. For example, we budgeted quite a bit for subs and didn't meet that expectation. So budgeting was a little off too. We were just guessing at some things. But anyway, and as I said, we budgeted like a normal year, as if, and we found many students were still served at home that normally we would have paid tuition out for. And so things were all different. And I've talked to other schools that they've had that same, they've come in much better than budgeted, especially in purchase services. So it does make sense. In May, we did receive our TIF RID money from the city of Monroe. And that source of revenue was $550,000 more than we received last year. And that is because of the increase in property values. So the result of all this is that we will be able to add back money into the general fund, and we did not expect that at the beginning. So, and then as Mr. Lees reported, we were told by our associations this morning that the conference committee was scheduled to meet today at 10 a.m. and issue its report reflecting the compromise reached between the Senate and the House of Representatives. And we were told that the Fair School Funding Plan appears to be the basis for the new school funding formula. And, but however, the text was not available, so I couldn't research it there. And I know they were going to vote on it late this afternoon. And I kind of turned it on right before actually I came into this meeting and heard, I heard Senator Sykes say he was glad the Fair School Funding Plan made it into the budget. So what I'd like to do is sort of look at it tonight and see what actually happened. So nothing other than that says it. And was the Fair School Funding Plan changed some? You know, you don't know these things, but I thought it was more positive. I mean, than we expected. So I just want confirmation what really is in there. So I'll find out and let you know. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Motion.
Oh yeah, I forgot to make the motion. Sorry.
No worries. No worries. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Thank you, Mr. Lee, or Mrs. Scott.
I go late.
Anything? Yeah. Any questions? Ms. Kale, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion
And,
carried.
and Mr. Carpenter. Oh,
Aye.
thank you.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
Item 4.3.
I'm asking the board to approve the bond fund report for May 31st, 2021.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Okay?
That's right.
You get the next one. All right.
Well, I would like to report that revenue was $218,750 from our TIF RID allocation, and we also received $203,000 from Homestead and Rollback. And, okay, so we did pay interest for our bonds too out of that fund, and the current balance is $3,340,341. So we're building up some balance in that fund, so, you know, maybe there's a chance of reducing the mills for the next year. So it's good to see.
Good. Any questions, Mr. Guido?
Well, what's the actual balance of those loans? Do you know? Are they on this report?
They're not. I can send that to you.
Yeah, I'm
How
just
much is
curious.
owed? Okay,
Oh, it's coming.
You threw me for a curveball.
I know.
I know.
okay.
Maybe I should ask.
Balances. Just to let you know.
Yeah. Do you want to ask the question?
Is everything where it's supposed to be?
Yes, it is.
Not, that just doesn't sound the same, does it?
We got a duet here.
Very good. Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the
Somebody's
roll.
going to take that over.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Item 4.4.
Oh, I'm asking the board to approve the $150,000 additional in our broadband grant from the state of Ohio.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 4.5.
I'm asking the board to approve a payment in lieu of taxes from the city of Monroe.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Guido.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Okay.
Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried.
Um,
And then, 4.6 was cut off.
I'm asking the board to approve a transfer of $30,000 from the general fund to Fund 003 for capital projects and permanent improvements.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 4.7.
I'm asking the board to approve the governor's emergency education relief fund grant of $3,000 and Fund 508. And this is money that's been passed through from the Butler County Educational Service Center.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Guido.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions?
The governor's giving us money. That's strange.
And we'll start with $3,000.
And then we'll work our way up.
Exactly right.
Baby steps.
Go way
Baby
to go,
steps.
Yeah,
He's got to add a few more zeros to that.
that's right.
Ms. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 4.8.
Okay. I'm asking the board to approve the final amended certificate of estimated resources for fiscal year 2021 for submission to the Butler County Budget Commission.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Any questions?
Can you just brief through this a
Pardon
little
me?
bit?
Oh,
Can you just summarize this?
okay, yes. It's adjusting our revenue budget based on actual receipts so that it supports our revisions to our expense budget as well, because our revenue and beginning balance and revenue must exceed our expenses. So it's by law that we need to approve this amended certificate, and it's, again, estimated resources, which is really actual because it's the end of the year and it's saying this is what we really received.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 4.9.
Next, I'm asking the board to approve final appropriations for 2021 as finalized by me and submitted to the County Budget Commission.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
And again, this is a revision to our budget based on our changes in revenue, and we do not exceed our balances, so it's just, we're good.
That's good. Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 4.10.
And lastly, I'm asking the board to approve temporary appropriations to begin fiscal year 2022. And the permanent ones will be in September, but this allows us to spend money in July, August, and September.
Okay. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Thank you, Mr. Leeds. I gave you one.
Is that Mr. Leeds and Mr. Carpenter?
Yeah, Mr. Carpenter, then Mr. Leeds.
Oh, Mr. Carpenter and Mr. Leeds. Okay, thank you.
Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Section 5, Superintendent's Personnel Business.
It is recommended that the board approve resignations from the following employees.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried.
Best of luck
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for.
to everybody.
Item 5.2.
It is recommended the board hire the following new employees.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Any questions? Get my pens.
So at this time, what we would like,
Should we vote first?
vote.
We'll vote first and then
yeah,
we'll.
sorry,
And then we're
Yes.
gonna, yeah.
got a little overly
We're
excited.
just so excited we get to pin him.
Ms. Gale, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried.
Now we can pin him.
So how
So
many?
we would like to have all the new hires come up and the board will greet you, they have
Yay.
a gift for you, and we will take a group picture.
It's a great time. We feel old tonight is what we want to say. Had these kids.
What's that? Missy's
See?
I tried getting it right.
You just signed up.
All right, now the meeting is empty. All right, where are we? We are at item 5.3.
It is recommended the board approve the following extracurricular contracts.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions? Ms. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Item 5.4.
The following employees have completed the requirements for a salary and/or degree increase.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions?
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations.
Good job.
Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Item 5.5.
It is recommended that the board approve the following stipend for teaching staff paid for by various colleges.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Section 6, Superintendent's Other Business.
Yes, it is recommended that the board approve the 2021 Monroe High School graduates.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Any questions?
Congratulations.
Yes. Official. Ms. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.2.
It is recommended the board approve the Neola recommended policy revisions as presented at the May 24, 2021 meeting.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions?
Good reading, man, I tell you.
Yes.
Great.
Want to do it again, Tom?
Yeah.
Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.3.
It is recommended for the board to approve the summary of services for fiscal year 2020 with the Butler County Educational Service Center.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Thank you, Mr. Guido. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.4.
Yes, I'm requesting approval of the contract with Butler County ESC for Beckett Springs for FY 2022.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.5.
I'm recommending the board approve the food service agreement with Sodexo for FY 2022.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Any questions? We always get cookies this time.
That's kind of interesting timing, isn't it?
I just want you to know I got double.
Yeah, I see that.
What'd she say?
She got double.
I got a half dozen.
Well, you're a runner, so it's all good.
Yeah, you can run it right off. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.6.
I'm recommending approval of the contract with Butler County ESC Orientation and Mobility Services and Vision Impaired Teacher Services for FY 2022.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions?
That number of students, that 11 students, can that vary? Will that vary any?
That could possibly vary from year to year,
Yeah. Okay, just one.
That's why there's in
but I
there.
think it's anticipated, is that correct, Nancy, that we'll have 11 for FY 2022?
But if something would happen with that student, that's why there's a not to exceed in there. So it adjusts. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.7.
I am recommending approval of the purchase of a pole vault pit system from Ritchie Athletics.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Guido.
Guido?
Was that a defective item from initially put in or not put in properly or what?
From what I understand, it was the
Just
original.
worn out.
Yeah, it's just worn out.
Just worn out? Okay. I didn't know how long they normally last.
What's the statute of limitations?
Figured that out.
It was in bad shape, right, Jesse?
End of life. Oh, yeah, it's end of life was years ago. We still
Oh, that's right.
Your relationship here and we actually were on our own material for this year. So, and theirs was an end of life, but not anywhere like end of life. So we have we got a year of grace, and you're actually got a year of discovery. And with people that have Google for 3 days, and then they're going to get in fact, I can't believe it.
Oh,
Nice.
cool.
There's got a lot of horse trading in business like
There.
That's awesome.
Yeah, good stuff.
Good.
Maybe we can go try it out.
Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Wait. Okay. Was it Mr. Guido second? Oh, it's Mr. Carpenter.
Yeah, it was Mr. Carpenter. It was a tie.
The AD down there seconded that.
Yeah.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.8.
It is recommended the board approve the 3-year 2021 to 2024 fire alarm service agreement.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Here you go, Brett.
Is this just a check, like the servicing of them or testing them, or there's not a, is there a cost? Do we have a cost agreement or is there an amount? Is it on there? I'm sorry. Okay, so, yeah. I'm sorry, I couldn't log on, so I didn't have it there. I was just curious.
Yeah, it's $3,940.
Is it the same, we're already
annually.
using them? Is this just a continuation of the same group?
Yes.
Cool, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Jesse.
Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.9.
It is recommended that the board approve the resolution to notify the Bureau of Motor Vehicles of student truancy.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second?
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Any questions?
So what, if they're truant, we just have to report them to the driver's license?
Yes, and their driving permit. So if they're getting a learner's permit and they've had consistent truancy to school, that can be either withdrawn, not issued, or if they have a driver's license.
And who makes that call? Is it the
Well,
motor
go through
vehicles or? Yeah.
the superintendent? The superintendent would notify
Is this
DMV, and DMV, I believe, would have a hearing. Is that correct? Yeah.
is it like a statewide idea or is this new, local? Is everybody doing this? Ah,
Bill had actually done this years ago. The law regarding truancy will pass a resolution giving the power.
so we haven't done it till now.
They've already done this procedure, but in terms of
Okay.
the law says that you have an actual resolution saying you have to.
Yes,
Yeah, I think it's great.
might motivate a few.
Good idea.
Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.10.
It is recommended that the board approve the addendum to contract with Sodexo for 3 additional custodians from June 1, 2021 through May 31st, 2022.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved?
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Any questions?
I do want to say this is going to be paid out of ESSER funds, just this component of it, just for this next year.
Okay.
I want to say that. Oh, I thought it was good.
Thank you. Anything else? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.11.
It is recommended the board approve the 2021-2022 District Student Code of Conduct revisions as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions? Ms. Scale, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.12.
It is recommended that the board approve the following donations.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved?
Second?
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Thank you,
Thank-
Mr. Guido. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Scale, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. And before we, hold on here. All right, just wanted to, I'm used to that one other section, so I just wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure my pages weren't flipped. Before we adjourn into executive session, we will go with comments from the board. Mr. Leeds.
Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate everybody and thank everybody again for the very good school year that we had and the circumstances that we had. And the plans that we got going for the next school year is up and running full bore and full activities and things like that. So we're back to normal unless something happens. And again, thank you, Kathy, for everything you have done and your staff. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Guido?
Ditto. That's all.
Mrs.
I
Stone?
can't say that now. Well, we'd like to say hi to our mayor who graced us with his presence this evening. That's kind of cool. Which shows we have a positive interaction with our city council leader. That's all I got tonight.
Mr. Carpenter?
Well, he's going to talk for a while.
Yeah. Let me get comfortable real quick.
Let me open my cookies.
Just hope everybody's having a great summer. Yeah, I don't know. That's about it. Like, there's not much to say. So, break my chair.
All right, well, I guess I'll be the long-winded one.
Oh,
Yeah, you
I'm
didn't
just
get my
kidding.
record.
I didn't get the record, so I'll just keep it going.
Still holding it.
Again, as Tom said, thank you to everyone involved in a great school year. It's officially over, and it took everyone involved, and hope everyone enjoys their summer. We've got a couple months left of your summer, so enjoy it. Other than that, and Kathy, thank you for everything, and Holly, everything that you guys have done. Appreciate it. That's it for me. So, that said, I closed my packet, and I need to get back to it. Yes. Yep. Section 7, item 7.1, is recommended that the board adjourn to executive session to consider the employment or compensation of an employee, revised code 121.22G1. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Hey, Jason.
Yep. to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gatto. Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Call the roll.
Please call the roll. Mr. Gatto?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone? Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Aye, motion carried. Meeting adjourned at 8:11.
Sorry, you did not.
That's on the July meeting now.